Hello, JT Wheatley here again, your friendly neighborhood host of the History of Comics podcast, back for another episode in, our series on the founders of Image Comics. And this time we'll be doing the life of Rob Liefeld. One of the most controversial artists in the American comic industry in recent decades has been Rob Liefeld. Accused of plagiarism and outright bad art, he continues to be one of the most polarizing figures in the medium, as he is also the co-creator of numerous classic characters, from Cable to Deadpool, along with being an Image Comics founder. In fact, Liefeld wasn't just a founder, he literally was the one that got the ball rolling. Rob Liefeld was born on October 3, 1967 in Fullerton, California, the youngest son of a Baptist minister father and a part-time secretary mother. His family, which also included a sister 7 years his senior, later moved to Anaheim, California, where he grew up. Growing up, he loved Star Wars and comic books and wanted to be a comic book artist straight out of high school, admiring the works of John Byrne, Frank Miller, Walter Simonson, George Perez, and Arthur Adams, many of whom he met at a local comic book convention at the nearby Disneyland Hotel. By the time he graduated, he was set about to become a professional comic book artist, having already created a finely tuned portfolio to show to prospective publishers. As Rob Liefeld was trying to make his big break, he took art classes at a junior local college, while also working as a pizza delivery man and construction worker, all while submitting his work to companies outside of Marvel and DC, as he was too intimidated to try for the big two just yet. Finally, Liefeld got a call from Gary Carlson, who was working on Megaton number 4 and was looking for replacements for artists who had left for bigger projects. Carlson liked Liefeld's submissions of pinups, mostly featuring DC and Teen Titan characters, along with a few Marvel ones, though he noted a goofy anatomy, something that would plague the artist for years. Overall, though, he felt Liefeld wasn't ready for professional work just yet. Undeterred, Rob Liefeld submitted more art for Megaton number 5, including pinups of Megaton characters Ultraman and Ultra Girl. Carlson ended up using one of these pinups for the inside cover of Megaton number 5, while the Ultra Girl pinup would be used in Megaton Explosion number 1 on July of 1987, a Who's Who's type reference book. It also featured a very early incarnation of Rob Liefeld's Youngblood, which would play a huge part in his life years later. Eventually, Carlson and his colleague Chris Ecker went to meet the still teenage Rob Liefeld, who still hadn't acquired his driver's license, at the Ramada O'Hare Inn during the Chicago Comic-Con, who had new art samples ready to show off. Further impressed, Carlson and Ecker gave Liefeld a script to test his page-to-page story, which they liked, though Gary Thomas would eventually draw the story. 2 months later, Rob Liefeld did an advertisement for his Youngblood team in Megaton number 8 on August of 1987, with it proclaiming the team would make its first appearance in Megaton Special number 1 by Liefeld and writer Harry Callands, who would later design the I logo for Image Comics. The cover was also provided by Jerry Ordway. Unfortunately, Megaton went out of business before the issue could be printed, thus Rob Liefeld's Youngblood was put on hold for now. Despite this setback, Rob Liefeld decided it was time to make a try for the big two, Marvel and DC. Learning from a friend that a lot of their editors would be incoming at the incoming San Francisco Comic Convention, he and a friend drove several hours to the city and stayed with his aunt and uncle. At the convention, Liefeld passed out his samples to numerous editors, including Dick Giorgeno at DC, who was impressed and requested more. At his friend's urging, Liefeld also approached Mark Gruenwald at Marvel, who offered him an 8-page backup feature in The Avengers starring the Black Panther. That story was ultimately penciled by another artist, Liefeld, though Liefeld did get the character design work for Gruenwald on top of that. Liefeld's first published work would be through DC, though, which appeared in DC Comics bonus book insert and World Lord number 131 on September of 1988. According to editor Robert Greenberger, Liefeld was given the job to keep him from going to Marvel, seeing his potential. Next, Liefeld would work on Hawk and Dove with editor Mike Carlin at DC. Originally a 5-issue miniseries starting in October of 1988, Liefeld started to get experimental with his storytelling near the end, flipping pages sideways, which caused some friction with Carlin, who had to have the pages cut and repaneled to keep them in proper order. But Liefeld quickly became a fan favorite with the thanks to the new series, resulting in Hawk and Dove becoming an ongoing series. It was also this miniseries that revived the classic Steve Ditko creations, who were originally twin brothers with powers based on Chaos, which is Hawk, and Order, which is Dove. In the revival, Dove is now the female Dawn Granger, replacing Hank Hall's brother Dawn. This modern incarnation has survived to this day and is, of course, the version featured in the current Teen Titans series on the DC streaming service. Despite this success, Carl Kessel, who co-wrote an Ink Hawk and Dove with Robert Liefeld, recalls Mike Carlin stating, "He has it, he just doesn't have it yet." Liefeld would go on to pencil Secret Origins number 28 for DC that same year as well. With his success at DC, it wasn't long before their chief rival, Marvel, came calling, with Robert Liefeld's first assignment being Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 23 in 1989. Later, Bob Harris, the new editor of the X-Men books, made Rob Liefeld the artist on the New Mutants, a spin-off of the Uncanny X-Men about a team of teenage mutants beginning with issue number 86. Working with writer Louis Simonson, it was slow going at first, but soon fans started to gravitate to the book and Liefeld's art, especially when he introduced the gritty new character Cable, who first appeared in New Mutants number 87 on March of 1990. A gun-toting cyborg from the future, he would later be revealed to be the son of Cyclops and Jean Grey's clone, Madeline Pryor, who was sent to the future as an infant to combat a techno disease he was infected with, which was done in Uncanny X-Men number 201 on January of 1986, making that technically Cable/Nathaniel Summers' first appearance. Soon, one of Marvel's lowest-selling books was a success, much of it credited to Liefeld's art. Liefeld would then be made full writer with issue number 97, with Fabian Nicieza writing the dialogue, and by the very next issue, they co-created Deadpool, the infamous merc with a mouth that has become one of the most popular characters in recent decades. With his success, Liefeld requested New Mutants be ended with issue number 100 on April of 1991, wrapping up the old storylines while sending the comic in an exciting new direction, introducing a new team that would be the basis for the series. Marvel was instantly on board, seeing the potential of recreating the success of Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man number 1. On August 1991, X-Force number 1 was launched, becoming one of the top-selling comic books of all time, thanks in part to a gimmick that each issue was bagged with 5 different trading cards. By the end of its first printing, it was 5 million copies of X-Force number 1 were sold, becoming the best-selling comic of all time. The comic would hold the record until X-Men number 1 Volume 2 by Jim Lee and Chris Claremont. The book's initial popularity was also explained by writer Fabian Nicieza, saying that the concept wasn't just there was a team that caught bad guys, but they made sure bad guys never did the bad things to begin with. Simply put, they were judge, jury, and executioner. Soon, Liefeld was so popular he made a Levi Jeans commercial directed by Spike Lee, which resulted from a campaign in which people called the 800 number to describe their unique jobs. Rob Liefeld called describing his job and was soon in the commercial. He would later talk about this, along with the comic book industry as a whole, with Stan Lee, on the second episode of the Comic Book Great series. With his growing success and popularity, Liefeld decided that to take Malibu Comics and David Obrecht's offer to publish anything he ever wanted. He originally wanted to do The Executioners, but was put on hold when Bob Harris at the Marvel ejected after seeing the book promoted in the comic book's buyer's guide. Harris stated it was too similar to X-Force and even threatened legal action. It didn't help that the X and Executioners heavily emphasized. Not wanting to tangle with Marvel, Liefeld and Malibu dropped the project, but the incident made Liefeld decide to make an honest go at creator-owned comics. This was part with his larger frustration with Marvel, as he didn't have ownership of his characters and his art was being used in other merchandise, such as t-shirts, without him getting a royalty check. He first reached out to Eric Larson and Jim Valentino, who shared similar concerns, and eventually Todd McFarlane was also brought in. And he quickly took over, and with their plan, they would ultimately become Image Comics. Todd McFarlane led the group in speeches against both Marvel and DC, with which Robert Liefeld was present at. With the addition of Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, and Ross Potasio, they set out to form Image Comics. Originally, Rob Liefeld planned to do both X-Force at Marvel in his new book, as some of the other creators planned to do, but McFarlane pointed out they could barely produce one book on a regular schedule, let alone 2. Plus, McFarlane also reasoned anything he makes for Marvel would be theirs, while at Image, it would be his. Thus, Liefeld would stop penciling X-Force with issue number 9 and plotting with issue number 11, allowing him to dust off his old idea for a team book, Youngblood. Youngblood was a concept Rob Liefeld had been working on for years, with the idea of being that superheroes would also be celebrities. Thus, they not only have to deal with fighting supervillains and stopping disasters, but working with publishers and marketing endorsement deals, as actors and sports athletes have to do in real life. While his work at DC and Marvel would interrupt his plans, he nearly got it off the ground at DC as a version of Teen Titans to be co-written by Marv Wolfman. However, according to Liefeld, he couldn't reach an agreement with DC editor Dick Giordano on the project, allowing Teen Titans to be merged with his previous creator-owned Youngblood. As a result, Liefeld changed some characters for his series, such as Shaft originally being Speedy, Green Arrow's sidekick, and Vogue being Harley Quinn. For Image Comics, Liefeld polished the concept and decided to publish Youngblood in the flipbook style, meaning it would consist of two stories, one featuring the A-Team, or domestic missions, which would feature Shaft, Chapel, Badrock, originally Bedrock, Die Hard, Photon, and Rogue, while the B-Team, overseas missions, featured Sentinel, Combat, Brahma, Sci-Fire, and Riptide. The first Image comic book would be Youngblood by Rob Liefeld, and the event was so popular Rob Liefeld appeared on the Dennis Miller Show to promote it. For additional promotions, a preview was published in the Malibu Sun #1 on February of 1992 from Malibu Comics, Image's publisher at the time. Also, on March 13th, 1,500 Ashcan editions, 5.5 by 8.5 inch black and white copies of the comic of each story, 1,000 for the A-Team and 500 of the B-Team, were also produced. Youngblood ended up selling 1 million copies, becoming the highest-selling independent book of all time. Originally, they hoped at best to reach 400,000 in sales, which was the number Dark Horse's Alien vs. Predator comic did, but that exceeded all expectations. Its first order was for 350,000 and then 800,000 before it finally reached its 1 million mark. It would later be passed by Todd McFarlane's Spawn, which ended up selling 1.3 million copies. However, despite this success, many critics said Youngblood was everything wrong with comics, from its stiff storytelling, poor anatomy and writing, and something that Rob Liefeld would own up years later. The comic also suffered from late shipments, something that plagued in many Image books, with issues number 1 through 5, along with issue number 0, appearing from April 1992 to July of 1993. Issues number 4 through 5 alone had a 5-month delay in between them. Issue number 5 was also noted for being a flip book with Brigade number 4, another comic of Liefeld Studios' Extreme, which was publishing about a team formed by a former Youngblood member, Battlestone. Nevertheless, Liefeld and his studio, Extreme, which he founded in Anaheim, California to publish the comics under the Image imprint, was a success. Liefeld would later take a sabbatical in 1993, though he still managed to bring in new talent, notably Stephen Platt, Marvel's top artist at the time thanks to his work on the Moon Knight, along with developing a new talent like Jeff Matsuda and Chap Ziep. It was this grind, though, that led to Liefeld to take his break. A year later, he returned to penciling with Youngblood number 6, with his line work notably improved. Extreme Studios in general was getting bigger and running better as well, with slicker books and not being so late, if at all, which also included Brigade, Bloodstrike, and Youngblood Strike File. Controversy would follow again, though, when Extreme Studios produced a crossover event in 1995 in which various books, including the Newman, fought against a magnetic-powered villain called Quantum. The similarities to Magneto and the X-Men were pretty obvious and only cemented the view by many that Liefeld tended to copy other peers' creations over making his own. Even Deadpool has received early comparisons to DC's Deathstroke and Deadshot. Liefeld also brought problems within Image when he started his own publishing company outside of the Image called Maximum Press, which angered his fellow founders. Liefeld intended Maximum for his non-superhero books, such as Evangeline and Battlestar Galactica. It wasn't the only move that would anger his fellow Image founders, though. In 1996, Marvel announced Heroes Reborn with Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, and Ross Portacio, returning to revamp Captain America, the Avengers, Iron Man, and the Fantastic Four. Both Liefeld and Lee were reportedly paid $3 million apiece up front, with Liefeld assigned the revamped Captain America, which he would pencil, and the Avengers, to be co-written by Jeff Loeb, while Lee took on Iron Man and the Fantastic Four. However, things got bad for Captain America #1, with fans complaining about the story and Rob Liefeld's unrealistic anatomy. Captain America's chest became an instant joke. It didn't help Liefeld interrupted a celebrated run on Captain America by Mark Waid and Ron Garney. With the poor quality of stories also followed by poor sales, it resulted in Marvel terminating Liefeld's contract early after just 6 issues, when the original was for a full 12, and turning Captain America and the Avengers over to Wildstorm and Jim Lee for the remaining 6. The comics eventually returned to Marvel proper with the Heroes Reborn event, along with Mark Waid and Ron Garney returning to Captain America. According to Rob Liefeld, he was terminated from Marvel due to the company filing for bankruptcy in 1997, and they asked him to lower his fee, which he refused. Thus, he was terminated instead. It will be one of the more embarrassing and controversial moments in Rob Liefeld's career, only to be topped by his return to Image. The Heroes Reborn event and Rob Liefeld starting Maximum Press already angered his fellow Image founders, but his final straw came when Liefeld and Extreme Studios tried to poach talent from his fellow Image studios. Originally, he tried to get Mark Silvestri and Top Cow to merge with Extreme, making it bigger than Jim Lee's Wildstorm. Losing those Heroes Reborn titles to him must have really smarted. Silvestri turned him down politely,